Your host, Christine Marie, and I am so happy to be here with you all today and talk about a topic that, frankly, doesn't need too much by way of introduction. There is a book titled The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And I had the privilege of going to visit Brandon Turner, who is one of the top real estate investors in at least the nation, if not the world. And I had the privilege of going and spending Thanksgiving with him and his family and a few others a couple years ago in Hawaii. And one of the things that was asked was, what is the single book that has had the greatest impact on you? And he said, The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And the book talks about this concept of effectively identifying the one thing in your life. What is the lead domino, so to say, that once you knock over that lead domino, it has the velocity to knock down the Eiffel Tower, literally. Like if you were to line up enough dominoes, the velocity of all of them traveling in force would have the strength to make that impact. And so that's the concept upon which this book is built. And so I've thought about that. I thought about that actually a lot shortly after our visit, and just really diving into what is the one thing. If there was anything in my life that I could change, what's that one thing? And back then I was identifying that, my early mornings were so precious to me. It was the time where I would get aligned. It was the time that I would kind of have to myself to create content. It was the time before the world awoke that was mine. And so I started waking up at 4 a.m, and that completely changed. I feel like that changed my life for that season. It was just a dramatic difference to have 4 hours to myself every day. But what I realized was that my one thing, my lead domino, wasn't actually waking up. It was when I went to bed. Because if I went to bed past 9 o'clock, I was done. I was toast the next morning. And it was almost like, what's the point of waking up if I'm just so tired? And so effectively, my one thing turned into not getting up at 4 a.m. and my morning habits, but it was the one thing that allowed for me to ensure that I did that. To maintain my habits was actually the bedtime and effectively how I lived out the night before. And so in this new season of life, I have been considering this question of what is the one thing, not just what's the one thing for me, but also what is like the one thing, because I've been thinking a lot about what my offer is. For knowing for the business, what's kind of the one thing, if I was to only be able to give off one key core offer, what would that be? But then I got it down much granular, because even as I was taking this concept of the one thing, it was like, okay, go to bed the night before every single day. But then I got more granular. So in order for me to achieve my mission in this season of life, or even just my mission in general, I know that my mornings are so critical and to be honored. And so therefore I must go to bed. But let's break it down on a more molecular level. So rather than taking what's my one thing in general in this season of life or this year, what's my one thing today? And that was so helpful. Actually, this is so funny. I just saw a video yesterday. No wonder this is on my mind. It was one of the sharks was being interviewed on the Diary of a CEO podcast. And he effectively was talking about his time working with Steve Jobs and how Steve Jobs was so incredibly vigilant about this. He called it the signals, where let's say you've got a list of 18 things, and you know that these 3 things are the signals that would have the greatest impact in your day. And then you dedicate the 16 hours of the day to drown out the noise of the rest of those, 15 tasks, to eliminate them and focus on those 3 things that you have identified as the most critical to your mission. And Steve Jobs, Elon Musk are these people that are so good at basically obliterating the noise, obliterating the horizontal that comes in and vies for our attention when we know that this is the thing that I have to do. This is the thing that I have to focus on, and everything else needs to be reprioritized or just completely shut out. It's effectively like a horse with blinders on, where they cannot see to the right and to the left, and they are laser focused on that which is before them. And so these men who have accomplished incredible things, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, they are it's notable. People around them who have worked with them have been like, actually, they're really annoying to work with because they're so laser focused. So obviously there's the question of, what's the right level of empathy with the right level of efficiency? So that's a different discussion. The point today is, what is the one thing? Do we know what that is for the season of life which we're in right now? But then also the one thing for the day. What is the one thing that I need to do to effectively power my mission forward? What's also the one thing, because it translates beyond just us, right? It translates into what's the one thing for my clients, because there are so many things, so many amazing, incredible opportunities, yet so many distractions, so much noise. And so I'm actually here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm going to be doing a Known Founder later this week, which is effectively a version of the Knowing Intensive. I was in New York 2 weeks ago, working with a couple and really working with them on their business and just diving deep. And what's so hard during this time of the deep exploration is that we're actually pulling forth, what are your dreams? What do you actually feel called to do? What's your vision? What are the things that effectively, those shiny objects, we need to identify them and call them out, because for so much of the time we actually can live so head down that we forget about the things that initially excited us to begin with, the things that like draw us and keep us motivated and keep us going, that are effectively the gas in our engine. Yet if we don't take the time to then also identify, yes, those are exciting, but they're not the one thing. We have to know what the one thing is in the high level, mission focused, know what the one thing is every single day. And then also knowing what that one thing is in each of our kind of, I like to call it life focus areas. So we've got the financial category, the professional category, the personal category, family, spirit. There's all these different elements of life that constitutes a life worth living. But y'all, the more intentional we are to design and create our lives, the more we live with a consciousness in every single step and every single decision. But we have to take the time to sit and be an artist and actually create, what do I want my life to look like? And that's a hard thing. I don't know if you all have found it hard. I found it hard for me. And I actually have to set up a structure and actually put myself out of kind of the comfort of my own home and really allow myself to get messy with it and really paint and really vision, what do I want my life to look like, literally, physically? How do I want to look? Because that question of how do I want to look physically, what do I wear? What do I want my body to look like? How do I want to feel? So much of that has been defined by society and fed it to me by the things that I see, the things that I hear. And I only up until a couple weeks ago did I actually ever, for the first time in my life, sit down and say, what do I actually want to look like? It was always predetermined by the subconscious ideal I had in my head. So again, with this whole concept of knowing, for business, personal, relationships, or otherwise, it is effectively pulling the subconscious into conscious awareness so that then we're the ones at the helm. We're the ones pulling the levers of our lives, not these subconscious ideals that the world puts before us, culture puts before us, religion puts before us. It's let's actually be the ones calling the shots. But we have to first take the time to do that. And so as I was thinking about this conversation today, if I was to say, here's the one thing that I would really encourage others to do, here's the one thing that if I could tell anyone to take any one single action, honestly, right now, and maybe even for the rest of their lives, I would say take time every day and journal. And when I say journal, I mean actually, ideally physically write, but at least write on a computer, write something somewhere, somehow, and do it for you. This isn't content creation. Maybe it can turn into content creation one day once you form the practice. But y'all, the more we get into the habit of actually writing from the inner place, we actually start to access it. So if we just start writing down what we're thinking about, eventually, it's almost like, actually, Joe Dispenza said this when we were there was 1,800 people at this week-long retreat at the Gaylord Hotel in DC. And effectively what he said was, if you just start letting, there was almost this like flow that's happening. And you know what, y'all? My phone is somewhere and it is buzzing. I'm going to turn it off because I'm actually getting distracted. So I just turned off my phone. I have my alarm set because I need to go to dinner here in just a few minutes. But what's so important and what's so interesting, and I just want to kind of get recentered right here. Y'all, this concept of journaling is that once we start with the flow, we will effectively allow for our subconscious to come forth. And there's a few prompts, let's say, that can help with that to really help us access the subconscious parts that maybe we don't normally. But man, if we just start and we just start, there's a concept that was told to me. I think I might have shared this in a recent episode, but there was a concept that was told to me that had a really significant impact. There's this verse in the Bible that talks about pouring out your soul before the Lord. And that was something I never did. It was something that I didn't even know the contents of my soul to then pour out. It was like, what does that even mean? And I feel, I even feel a little nervous talking about this. And I know I've said this a handful of times, but I do. I hate, oh gosh, there's something, even now as I'm talking about a biblical story, I feel a little funny in my stomach. I feel just this discomfort because it's so, I just have had so many experiences where the church was the place I wanted to like hide from the most when I probably needed what it was designed to be the most. And so I feel leery talking about it because there's just so much pain wrapped up in it. And at the same time, there have been so many areas where it has proved to be what I've needed when I've allowed for revelation to come from it, not someone else to interpret it. So it's really when we start allowing for these stories in terms of the biblical stories, or it's just spiritual stories, to allow for us to be gleaning revelation from within and from above, rather than just having everything parroted for us from those pastors, popes, and priests that we all are so familiar with. And even our own parents, there's so much. When I was talking just a few moments ago about how I never really had sat and thought about, how do I actually want to physically look for myself? Not just what culture says I should look like, but what do I like? How do I want to show up in a physical way? It sounds so simple, but I really had never actually thought about it. And how many other things do we operate our very lives off of that we have never really thought about? Why do I believe this in the first place? And so this is why it's so incredibly important. If we just journaled every single day, just started writing that one thing, that is the one thing that I believe every single person in the world would benefit from doing, because they're going inward rather than constantly going outward, outsourcing revelation, outsourcing beliefs, outsourcing opinions, expectations for their lives, but rather they're actually going inward for the first time and maybe starting to think for themselves for the first time. And y'all, that's scary, because what if I think something that my sister doesn't, and what happens when we have conflict or disagree? What does it actually mean and look like to have healthy contention and actually have ironing sharpening iron? We don't have an environment at least we don't have a digital environment that welcomes, I guess you could say, conversation where there's difference of opinions. It's not even contention. It's just a conversation where there's difference of opinions. So, but it starts with us going inward. It starts with us being radically responsible to know why we think or believe or feel, have the mindset that we do in the first place. So when we think about that one thing, that is what I would say to every single person. If you're not already, please take the time every day. It doesn't matter when, but please take the time to write and just pour out what's inside of you. Because once you then know what's inside of you, then you can begin to get to know yourself and say, oh, I didn't know I thought that. Or, oh, I didn't know I felt that way after all those years. That's what I think. And so, I've got these 21 days of vertical alignments that they're really meaningful to me, because they are effectively prompts that I've moved through and questions I've asked myself to really help to come to know, well, who am I and who do I want to be? We talk about this ideal, this version of effectively questioning everything that we think and want and believe. Y'all, it is so critical that we actually take the time to then analyze every single area of our life. I just saw Joe Ingram on Instagram. It's good to see you. Y'all, we need to be going inward to know who we are, so that then we actually have something to give. This whole culture of self-love is not the goal. The self-love culture that I'm talking about, which is saying no to everyone around you and putting up all the boundaries to keep people out. Maybe boundaries are needed, but the goal of knowing is first and chiefly love. And then the goal of knowing second is creation. Because when we actually come from an authentic place, we actually have something original for the first time, rather than just parroting what everyone around us thinks, says, feels, believes. We're actually starting to create something new, but it has to come from an original source. And so if we have not done the work to tap into the authentic well from within, everything that's going to overflow is going to be a replica, a phantom, a mirror of everyone around us. And so if you were to do one thing, that's what I would say. And frankly, I'd love to hear what you would say. What is the one thing in your life that has had the biggest impact that if you could give the rest of the world, here's the one thing you all should do? I'd love to hear what that is. Because y'all, we have this one life. We have this one shot that we know of. And so if we want to live it awake and live it consciously, what is the one thing that helps us live in such a way, even just now, being so grounded and so present, living awake? When I say that, it's like, even now, just taking a moment and listening, I can all of a sudden, by being present, I can hear the hum of the AC unit. Then I just heard a car rumble outside. And I just see the light reflecting on the trees outside, and there's a little hummingbird. But how much of life are we actually just moving too quickly? So this concept of journaling isn't just about going inward, but it's about being truly grounded and present in the moment to just take stock of what is. Because how often do we not remember what happened 2 hours ago because we're living so fast, and in the future, we're actually not even living in the now. Y'all, thank you so much for the encouragement that I get a lot of messages on a regular basis of just encouragement on the topics that we're discussing. When we talk about emotional intelligence and emotional health, it's sometimes so easy to dismiss it because it's frankly something I've dismissed my whole life. And I'm only now over the last few years really starting to honor it. But it is something that doesn't get enough attention in the way that it's really causing real change, causing like connecting, like linking human to human. That's the goal of this emotional connection and this emotional health is love, is the overflow and the outpouring and the soulish bonds that allow for healing and health to permeate our cultures, permeate our schools, permeate our businesses. This is why we know. This is why we come to live in alignment with who we were created to be, so that we can thus create in the world around us and effectively be those images and image bearers of the divine who created us in the first place. So with that, I so appreciate you all. Joe said the realization that people can't see your vision, so they caution you on chasing it or call you crazy. Y'all, we can't live for everyone around us. We have to be living connected from within, so then we can create something that impacts the world around us and loves them so well and makes the change that we want to see. But the change has to be